I was standing in the bank manager's office when I realized my marriage had been a 28-year-long performance, and I'd been the only one who didn't know I was acting in a tragedy. The manager, a woman named Patricia with reading glasses on a beaded chain, slid a document across her mahogany desk. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice careful, practiced, "I need you to look at this withdrawal history." I looked down at the paper. My hands didn't shake. They should have, but they didn't. $847,000 gone. If you also believe that a man deserves respect in his own home, that his sacrifices should mean something, hit the like button right now to support our community, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story, it's a warning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind to the morning it all started to unravel, 6 weeks before that bank office. The morning I realized I'd been living with ghosts. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were when I made breakfast for everyone. Scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, the expensive sourdough bread my wife Margaret insisted we buy from that artisan bakery downtown. I'd been doing it for years, 28 years of Tuesdays to be exact. I stood at the stove in our kitchen, our $2. $3 million kitchen, if you counted the marble countertops and the sub-zero fridge that cost more than my first car, and I listened to my family move through the house like I wasn't there. Margaret walked past me in her silk robe, the ivory one I'd bought her for our anniversary 3 years ago. She didn't say good morning. She grabbed her green smoothie from the counter, the one our housekeeper Rosa made for her every morning, and disappeared into the sunroom with her phone pressed to her ear. I heard her laugh, light, musical, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in a decade. My daughter Ashley appeared next, 26 years old, moving through the kitchen like she was navigating an obstacle course designed to avoid me. She had her mother's blonde hair, her mother's sharp cheekbones, and lately her mother's contempt. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, sliding a plate of eggs toward her usual spot at the island. She looked at the plate like I'd presented her with roadkill. "I'm vegan now, Dad. I told you that like 3 weeks ago." She grabbed a protein bar from the pantry, a pantry I'd stocked in a house I'd paid for, in a life I'd apparently stopped being invited to participate in. "Right," I said. "Sorry, I forgot." She didn't respond. She was already texting, her thumbs moving with the kind of urgency you'd reserve for a national emergency. I watched her leave, her $2,000 Celine bag swinging from her shoulder. A graduation gift I'd bought her when she'd finished her master's degree in art history, a degree she'd never used. My son Tyler came last. 23, still living at home, still finding himself. He'd been finding himself for 5 years now, mostly in our guest house, mostly playing video games and smoking weed he thought I didn't know about. "Hey, Dad," he said, and at least he acknowledged my existence. That was something. "Morning, Ty. Eggs?" "Nah, I'm good. I'm meeting Connor for brunch later." Connor, the friend with the trust fund and the sports car, the one who'd never worked a day in his life. "Sounds good," I said. He left too. I stood there in that expensive kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a breakfast no one wanted, and I felt it, the weight of invisibility. I wasn't a father, I wasn't a husband. I was an ATM with a pulse, a signature on checks, a name on a mortgage. I was 58 years old, and I'd spent the last 3 decades building a life that no longer included me. I ate my eggs alone. They were cold by then. I didn't mind. I was used to cold things. I should probably tell you what I did for a living, because it matters. It matters a lot. I was a forensic accountant, specialized in fraud detection, embezzlement cases, corporate malfeasance. I spent my career finding money that people didn't want to be found. I tracked digital breadcrumbs through offshore accounts, shell corporations, phantom employees. I was good at it, better than good. I'd testified in federal court 11 times. I'd saved companies millions. I'd sent 3 CEOs to prison. The irony wasn't lost on me, even then. I worked from home most days in my office on the 2nd floor, the room with the view of the garden Margaret never went into anymore. The room that smelled like coffee and old books, and the leather of my chair, worn smooth from years of sitting, thinking, calculating. That Tuesday I had a case file open on my screen. A tech startup CEO suspected of siphoning investor funds into a personal account in the Caymans. The numbers told a story. They always did. People thought they were clever, thought they could hide things in the noise, in the complexity. But money left tracks. Money always left tracks. I was good at my job because I was patient, because I didn't react, because I understood that the truth revealed itself if you just waited long enough and looked closely enough. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to use those same skills on my own life. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. It was late, after 11. I'd been working on the startup case, lost in spreadsheets and bank transfers, when I heard Margaret's voice downstairs. Sharp, urgent, the kind of tone you use when you're trying to be quiet but you're angry. I should have minded my own business. That's what a good husband would have done. But I'd stopped being a good husband somewhere around the time I realized I was the only one trying. I walked to the top of the stairs and listened. I don't care what he thinks, Richard. He doesn't even notice anything anymore. Her voice was moving. She was pacing in the kitchen, probably looking out at the pool lights we'd installed last summer, the ones she'd insisted we needed for ambiance. Richard. I didn't know a Richard. The kids are on board, she continued. Ashley's already moved most of her stuff to the condo. Tyler's useless, but he'll do what I tell him. We just need to wait until after the refinance closes. Then we can move everything. My chest tightened. Not with panic. Not yet. With focus. The same focus I used when I found the first thread of fraud in a case. He's a forensic accountant, Richard. Not a detective. He spends 14 hours a day staring at spreadsheets for other people's companies. He has no idea what's happening in his own house. She laughed. That laugh. I went back to my office. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm downstairs and demand answers. That's not how you win. That's how you lose leverage. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop. I titled it Personal Margaret, and I started documenting. But that was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 a.m., same as always. Margaret was still asleep, her back to me, the curve of her spine visible under the silk sheets. I used to find her beautiful. Now I just found her expensive. I went to my office, and I did something I'd never done before. I pulled our personal financial records, all of them. Joint checking, savings, investment accounts, credit cards. The kids' accounts I'd set up for them when they were teenagers, accounts I still contributed to monthly because they were finding their purpose or building their brand, or whatever terminology trust fund children use to avoid saying unemployed. I started with the joint checking account, the one we used for household expenses, vacations, the gardener, Rose's salary. The balance looked normal, $34,000, consistent with the last few months. Then I looked at the transaction history. There, a transfer, $15,000 to an account I didn't recognize. The notation read, Property Management, Maersk. We didn't own rental properties. I kept scrolling. Another transfer, $22,000. Home renovation, contractor. We hadn't renovated anything in 2 years. Another, $8,500. Medical, specialist. No one in our family had been to a specialist in months. I felt my jaw tighten, not from anger. From recognition. I'd seen this before. In cases, in depositions, this was structuring. This was someone trying to make large withdrawals look routine, spread them out, blend them into the noise of daily expenses. This was embezzlement. From our own accounts. By my own wife. I pulled the records for our savings account. The one we'd built for retirement, for emergencies, for the future I'd apparently been building alone. The balance was $47,000. It should have been $95,000. I sat back in my chair. The leather creaked. Outside, I could hear the gardener's truck pulling into the driveway. Carlos, every Wednesday morning, $300 a week, always on time. My heart rate was steady, 62 beats per minute. I'd checked it once on my Apple Watch during a particularly stressful trial testimony, and it had been 64. I was calmer now, sitting in my home office discovering that my wife had stolen nearly $1 million from me, than I had been explaining GAPE principles to a jury. That should have told me something about my marriage. It did. I opened a new spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, amount. Column C, account. Column D, notation. Column E, actual purpose. I started filling it in, every withdrawal, every transfer, every lie formatted as a line item. It took me 4 hours. When I was done, I had a document that told a story about a woman who'd spent 28 years married to a man she saw as a resource, not a partner. A woman who'd raised 2 children to see their father the same way. A woman who was now systematically, methodically, stealing everything I'd worked for and hiding it somewhere I hadn't found yet. Not yet. I saved the file. I backed it up to 3 separate drives, cloud, external, and a USB drive I put in the fireproof safe in my closet, the one Margaret didn't know the combination to because she'd never cared enough to ask. Then I went downstairs and made breakfast. Margaret walked past me, phone to her ear, laughing at something someone named Richard said. Ashley ignored me. Tyler asked if I could Venmo him $400 for car repairs. I sent him $500, and I smiled, because I'd learned a long time ago that the best investigations start with the subject having no idea they're being investigated. I thought it couldn't get worse. I was wrong. I hired the private investigator on a Thursday. His name was Marcus Webb, 51 years old, former LAPD, licensed and bonded with a specialty in domestic cases. I found him through a colleague who'd used him in a corporate espionage case. Marcus didn't advertise. He didn't have a website. He had a phone number and a reputation for being thorough, discreet, and expensive. I could afford expensive. We met at a coffee shop in Santa Monica, far enough from our neighborhood that there was no chance of running into anyone Margaret knew. He was exactly what you'd expect. Solid build, gray at the temples, wearing khakis and a polo shirt like he was trying to blend in at a suburban BBQ. He ordered black coffee. I ordered the same. "Mr. Brennan," he said, shaking my hand with the kind of firm grip that said he'd spent years earning trust in rooms where trust was currency. "Marcus Webb, tell me what you need." I told him everything. The phone call, the transfers, the missing $48,000, the kids, Richard. He took notes in a leather-bound notebook, actual pen and paper, old school. When I finished, he looked up at me with eyes that had seen this story 100 times before. "You want me to find the money?" he said. "I want you to find everything," I corrected. "The money, where it went, who Richard is, what properties she's buying, what accounts she's opened. I want a timeline, I want documentation, I want evidence that will hold up in court." He nodded slowly. "You're a forensic accountant." "I am." "So you know how this works. You know what I'm going to find isn't going to feel good." "I know. And you know that once I find it, you can't unknow it." I looked at him across the table. This stranger I was trusting with the ruins of my marriage. And I said the truest thing I'd said in months. "I've been unknowing things for 28 years. I'm done." He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just accepted a job he knew would end badly for everyone except his bank account. "Retainer is $10,000. I'll have preliminary findings in 2 weeks." I wrote him a check from my personal business account, the one Margaret didn't have access to, the one I'd kept separate because even in my optimism I'd had enough sense to protect something. We shook hands again. As I walked back to my car, I felt it for the first time in weeks. Purpose. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was hunting. Marcus called me 11 days later. "We need to meet," he said. His voice was flat, professional, the voice of someone delivering bad news to someone who'd paid for the privilege of hearing it. We met at the same coffee shop, same table, same black coffee. He slid a manila folder across the table. Thick, too thick. "Before you open that," he said, "I need to tell you something. I've been doing this for 19 years. I've seen men cheat with their secretaries. I've seen women empty accounts and flee to Costa Rica. I've seen families destroy each other over money and spite and boredom. But what's in that folder, that's calculated, that's long-term, that's not impulsive. This was planned." I opened the folder. The first page was a property deed. A condominium in Newport Beach. 2 bedrooms, ocean view, purchased 8 months ago for $1.2 million. Cash sale. Buyer, Margaret Ann Brennan. Except it wasn't our Margaret Ann Brennan. It was an LLC. MAB Properties, LLC. Registered in Delaware. Sole member, Margaret Ann Brennan. I turned the page. Bank statements. An account at a different bank, one I'd never heard of, some boutique private wealth management firm in Beverly Hills. Balance, $640,000. Another account, $127,000. There's another, $83,000. She'd been moving money for 2 years, small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, testing to see if I'd notice. When I didn't, she got bolder. $20,000, $35,000, $50,000. The last transfer had been 3 weeks ago. $60,000 labeled medical emergency, Ashley. There had been no medical emergency. Ashley had been in Cabo with her friends, posting photos on Instagram of herself drinking margaritas in an infinity pool. I kept reading. Richard Valente, 53, real estate developer, divorced, 2 kids, both adults. Met Margaret at a charity gala 18 months ago. A gala I'd skipped because I'd been working on a case, because I'd trusted my wife to represent us, because I'd been an idiot. They'd been careful, no hotels. The condo in Newport was their meeting place. Marcus had photos, time-stamped. Margaret's car in the parking garage, Richard's Mercedes next to it. Sometimes for 2 hours, sometimes for 6. Sometimes Ashley's car was there too. I stopped reading. "Your daughter knew," Marcus said quietly. I looked up at him. "What?" "Ashley. She's been to the condo, multiple times. She has a key. I have her on camera letting herself in when your wife wasn't there. She's been helping, staging furniture, meeting with a realtor. Your wife is planning to sell your family home and move into that condo with Richard. Ashley's been helping her prepare for it." The coffee in my cup had gone cold. I wasn't angry. That's the strange part. I wasn't even hurt. Not in the way you'd expect. I was something worse. I was fascinated. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was a project. This was organized crime, family edition. This was my wife and my daughter running a con on me, on us, with the kind of efficiency I'd only seen in corporate fraud cases involving multiple conspirators. "What about Tyler?" I asked. "Your son's clueless," Marcus said. "High most of the time. I don't think he knows anything. He's just collateral." I nodded. That tracked. "There's more," Marcus said. "Of course there is." He turned to the last section of the folder. Emails printed out, dated over the last 6 months. Margaret to Richard. He doesn't even look at the accounts anymore. Too busy with his little spreadsheets. Ashley to Margaret. "Dad asked me about the condo. I told him it was for a friend. He believed me. He always believes me." Margaret to Ashley. "Once the house sells, we split everything. You'll have your own place. Finally free." Richard to Margaret. "Can't wait to start our life together. A life you actually deserve. Not this boring prison you've been stuck in." I closed the folder. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked. I looked at him. This man I'd hired to destroy my life in the most thorough way possible. "I want you to keep documenting," I said. "Every meeting, every transaction, every lie. I want dates, times, locations, amounts. I want evidence that's admissible, unimpeachable, and absolutely devastating. And then I want to introduce them to the concept of consequences." He smiled. The same smile from before. The smile of a man who'd just been given permission to do his job well. "I'll send you updates weekly," he said. We shook hands. I drove home. Margaret was in the living room, on the phone, laughing. I walked past her into my office. I opened my laptop, and I started building the case that would end my marriage, bankrupt my wife, and teach my daughter that you don't steal from a man who gets paid to find stolen things. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. Tell me in the comments, would you have exploded right there or would you have waited like I did? The next 4 weeks were the strangest of my life. I lived in a performance. Every morning I woke up next to a woman who was actively robbing me. Every breakfast, I made food for a daughter who was helping her do it. Every interaction was a scene from a play where only I knew the script had changed. I didn't change my behavior. That was crucial. I remained exactly who I'd been, the boring husband, the ATM father, the invisible man funding a life I wasn't invited to. But at night, in my office, I became something else. I became the forensic accountant who'd never lost a case. Marcus sent me updates every Monday. Photos of Margaret and Richard at dinner in Laguna Beach. Video of Ashley meeting with interior designers at the Newport condo. Receipts from furniture stores, art galleries. A jeweler where Margaret had bought herself a $40,000 diamond bracelet using money she'd transferred from our retirement account. I documented everything. I cross-referenced every transaction with calendar dates. I pulled credit card statements and matched charges to Marcus's surveillance photos. I built a timeline so detailed, so airtight, that it could survive the most aggressive cross-examination. I contacted 3 attorneys, all specialists in high-net-worth divorce, all with reputations for being absolutely ruthless. I chose the woman who'd made a California state senator cry on the stand. Her name was Diane Sorensen, 60 years old, silver hair cut short, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Tyler's car. We met in her office in Century City, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles, the kind of view that reminded you why people paid $800 an hour for legal advice. She read through my folder, now 3 inches thick, in complete silence. When she finished, she looked up at me with the expression of a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "do you understand what you have here? Documentation of embezzlement, adultery, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "No," she said, "you have a nuclear weapon. What your wife has done isn't just grounds for divorce, it's potentially criminal. The structuring of transfers, the creation of a shell LLC without your knowledge as a spouse in a community property state, the systematic theft of marital assets. She could face criminal charges if you wanted to pursue them." "I don't want her in prison," I said. "What do you want?" I thought about that question, really thought about it. What did I want? I wanted my wife to understand that I wasn't invisible, that I'd never been invisible, that I'd been patient, that I'd been kind, that I'd been generous, and that she'd mistaken all of that for weakness. I wanted my daughter to learn that actions have consequences. I wanted to walk away from this marriage with my dignity, my assets, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd won using nothing but the truth. "I want everything," I said. Diane smiled. "Then let's get to work." We filed on a Friday. Diane's advice: maximum impact, minimum warning. The petition for dissolution of marriage was 47 pages long. It detailed every transfer, every lie, every instance of fraud. It requested full forensic accounting of all marital assets. It requested exclusive use of the family home pending trial. It requested immediate freezing of all accounts in Margaret's name or under her control. It requested reimbursement with interest of all misappropriated funds. It was attached with 340 pages of exhibits, bank statements, property deeds, surveillance photos, credit card receipts, email printouts, text message transcripts that Marcus had obtained through methods I didn't ask about and didn't want to know. It was, in Diane's words, a masterpiece of aggressive litigation. We had it served at 4 p.m. Margaret was at home. Ashley was with her. They'd been planning a girls' trip to Napa, funded, I discovered, by $8,000 she'd transferred from our joint account labeled Medical Physical Therapy. The process server was a woman in her 30s who looked like she could have been dropping off a package. I wasn't there. I was at Diane's office. We'd set up a war room, conference table, laptops, phones, documents organized in labeled binders. Marcus was there too. And another lawyer from Diane's firm, a younger man named Joel who specialized in asset recovery. My phone rang at 4:37 p.m. Margaret. I let it ring. She called again. Again. 12 times in 15 minutes. Then Ashley called. Then Tyler called. Tyler, who I'd thought was clueless, who apparently had just been informed by his mother that his father was trying to destroy the family. I didn't answer any of them. At 5:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "We need to talk. This is insane. Call me." I showed it to Diane. She took my phone and typed a response. "All communication must go through my attorney, Diane Sorensen." She included the office number. She hit send. "Now," Diane said, setting my phone down, "we wait for them to panic." They panicked. Margaret's lawyer showed up at 9 a.m. Monday morning. His name was Bradford Chen. I knew him by reputation. Mid-tier family law attorney, competent enough for straightforward divorces, completely out of his depth for what was about to happen to him. Diane had predicted he'd request an emergency hearing to unfreeze the accounts. She was right. The request came through at 10:47 a.m. The hearing was set for Thursday. That gave us 3 days. Diane spent those 3 days doing what great lawyers do. She prepared for war while making it look like a casual conversation. We rehearsed my testimony. We organized exhibits by theme: embezzlement, fraud, adultery, conspiracy. We prepared cross-examination questions for Margaret that were designed not to elicit information, but to destroy credibility. The goal, Diane explained Tuesday afternoon, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed a transcript of Margaret's emails, is not to make the judge feel sorry for you. Judges don't care about your feelings. The goal is to make the judge angry at her. Judges hate being lied to. Judges hate liars who think they're clever. And your wife, Mr. Brennan, left us a paper trail that screams, "I think I'm clever." She was right. But before Thursday came, I had to go home. I'd been staying at a hotel since Friday. The Mondrian in West Hollywood, a room with a view I didn't look at and a minibar I didn't touch. I needed to get clothes, documents, my medication for the high blood pressure I'd developed somewhere around year 15 of pretending everything was fine. I went Tuesday evening, 6 p.m., after Margaret's typical yoga class schedule. The house would be empty, except it wasn't. I pulled into the driveway and saw Richard's Mercedes parked in the circular drive, right where I used to park before Margaret had insisted that I use the side garage instead because it looked better for guests. I sat in my car for a moment, engine off, hands on the steering wheel. Then I got out. The front door was unlocked. I walked in. Voices from the kitchen. Margaret, Ashley, Richard. I stood in the foyer with the marble floors I'd paid for, under the chandelier I'd never wanted but had bought anyway, because Margaret said it was classic. And I listened. "He's going to ruin us." Ashley's voice. High-pitched. The voice of someone who just realized that actions had consequences and didn't like how they tasted. "Mom, he has everything. Photos, bank statements, the emails. He doesn't have anything that will hold up in court." Margaret, calm, still believing she could talk her way out of this, still believing I was the boring man who'd never fight back. "It's all circumstantial. Bradford says—" "Bradford is a moron." Richard's voice. Deeper than I'd expected. Smoother. The voice of a man used to selling things, properties, futures, fantasies. "Your husband is a forensic accountant, Margaret. He does this for a living. He finds money that people try to hide. Did you really think—" That's when I walked into the kitchen. 3 heads turned. Margaret froze. She was wearing the cashmere sweater I'd bought her for Christmas, the pale grey one that made her eyes look blue. She looked older than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. Ashley went pale. She was standing by the island holding a wine glass, our Waterford crystal, the set from our wedding registry, 28 years of careful hand-washing so they wouldn't chip. Richard just looked at me, assessed me. 6'1", good shape for his age, expensive watch, the kind of tan you get from golf courses and sailboats. He had the confidence of a man who'd spent his life taking things that belonged to other people and calling it business. Nobody spoke. I walked to the counter, set my keys down. The sound echoed in the silence. "Richard," I said, calm, conversational. "I'm Robert. We haven't been formally introduced." He had the decency not to offer his hand. "I'm here to get some clothes," I continued. "I'll be upstairs for about 20 minutes. I'd appreciate it if you were gone when I came back down." Margaret found her voice. "Robert, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. The accounts, the condo, it was an investment. I was trying to—" "Margaret." I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman I'd loved for 3 decades, the woman who'd stood next to me at our wedding and promised things she'd apparently never meant. "Do you remember what I do for work?" She blinked. "You're an accountant." "I'm a forensic accountant. I investigate fraud. I've testified in federal court 11 times. I've sent people to prison for doing exactly what you did, structuring transfers to avoid detection, creating shell entities to hide assets, conspiracy to commit theft. The only difference between you and the criminals I've helped convict is that they were stealing from strangers. You were stealing from your husband." Ashley made a sound. A sob, maybe. Or maybe just the sound of reality arriving with a bill she couldn't pay. "The condo in Newport isn't an investment," I continued. My voice was steady. It always was. "It's a marital asset purchased with marital funds without my knowledge or consent in a community property state. The LLC you created, MAB Properties, is fraudulent. Every transfer to your secret accounts is traceable, documented, and admissible. You have stolen $847,000 from our marriage, and you did it with the help of our daughter and your boyfriend." I turned to Ashley. "You knew," I said. "You helped her. You have a key to the condo. You met with realtors. You picked out furniture. You looked at me every morning at breakfast and you lied." Tears were running down her face now, real ones. "Dad, don't." The word came out harder than I intended. "Don't apologize. Don't cry. Don't perform. You made a choice. You chose your mother's con over your father's honesty. That's fine. People make choices. But choices have consequences." I looked at Richard. "You should leave now," I said. "Because in about 6 days, when this goes to court and everything becomes public record, the affair, the fraud, the conspiracy, your business is going to suffer. Your reputation is going to suffer. Your name is going to be attached to a fraud case. Potential clients will Google you and find articles about how you helped a woman steal from her husband. Your ex-wife will probably find it amusing." His jaw tightened, but he was smart enough to stay quiet. I picked up my keys. 20 minutes, I said, and I walked upstairs. I packed slowly, methodically, suits for court, shirts, ties. The watch my father gave me when I made partner at my firm 20 years ago. Documents from my safe, birth certificate, passport, stock certificates, the deed to a small cabin in Colorado I'd inherited from my uncle, a property Margaret had forgotten existed. When I came back down, they were gone. The house was empty. I walked through it one last time. The living room where we'd hosted Christmas parties. The dining room where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. The kitchen where I'd made thousands of breakfasts for people who'd stopped seeing me. I didn't feel sad. I felt relieved. I locked the door behind me and drove back to the hotel. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline Los Angeles weather that made everything seem possible. The courthouse was downtown, Department 82, Judge Patricia Henley presiding. She was 63, appointed by a Democratic governor, known for being no-nonsense and having exactly 0 patience for people who wasted her time. Diane had called her perfect for us. We arrived at 8:45 a.m. for a 9 a.m. hearing. Diane wore navy blue, Brooks Brothers, conservative, trustworthy. I wore charcoal gray. We looked like what we were, serious people with serious evidence. Margaret arrived at 8:52 a.m. with Bradford Chen and Ashley. Margaret wore cream, a color choice that Diane later said was suburban mom trying to look innocent. Ashley looked like she'd been crying for days. Maybe she had. Richard wasn't there. Smart man. We went through security, up to the 3rd floor. Department 82 was at the end of the hall. Wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting and the smell of floor polish and stale coffee. Judge Henley took the bench at exactly 9 a.m. "Good morning," she said. Clipped, efficient. "This is an OSC re-preliminary injunction in the matter of Brennan versus Brennan. Mr. Chen, this is your motion. Tell me why I should unfreeze assets in a case involving allegations of substantial marital waste and fraud." Bradford stood. He had notes, too many notes. That was his first mistake. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Margaret Brennan, is effectively destitute due to Mr. Brennan's aggressive and punitive freezing of all accounts. She has no access to funds for basic necessities, no ability to retain proper counsel, no—" "Mr. Chen." Judge Henley's voice cut through his prepared speech like a scalpel. "Your client owns a $1.2 million condominium in Newport Beach, purchased 8 months ago. Are you representing to this court that she's destitute?" Bradford froze. "The condo was an investment property, Your Honor, purchased with marital funds as part of normal financial planning." "With marital funds?" Judge Henley picked up a document from her desk. "Purchased in an LLC that Mr. Brennan knew nothing about." Using money transferred from retirement accounts without his knowledge or signature. That's your definition of normal financial planning. Your Honor, in the context of a long marriage, it's not unusual for one spouse to handle investments. Ms. Sorensen, the judge turned to Diane. Tell me why you're here. Diane stood. No notes. Your Honor, we're here because the respondent has engaged in a systematic 2-year campaign to steal marital assets and hide them in secret accounts in preparation for leaving the marriage. We have documented $847,000 in fraudulent transfers. We have evidence of adultery. We have emails between the respondent and her paramour discussing their future together. Emails that refer to my client as a boring prison. We have surveillance evidence. We have our daughter actively conspiring with the respondent. This isn't marital waste, Your Honor. This is organized theft. You have exhibits? 340 pages, Your Honor. All authenticated. All admissible. Judge Henley looked at Bradford. You've reviewed these exhibits? Some of them, Your Honor, but some of them. The judge's tone could have frozen vodka. She spent the next 20 minutes reading. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning and Bradford Chen's increasingly nervous breathing. Finally, Judge Henley looked up. Mr. Chen, your client has stolen nearly $1 million from marital accounts, hidden it in fraudulent entities, and carried on an affair while planning to abandon her husband. And you want me to give her access to more money. Your Honor, the characterization of theft is... It's accurate. That's what it is. Call your first witness. Bradford called Margaret. This was the moment Diane had been waiting for. Margaret took the stand. She was sworn in. Bradford started with softballs. Mrs. Brennan, can you explain the nature of the Newport Beach property? It was an investment. I was trying to build financial security for our family. Robert is so focused on his work, I thought... Objection. Diane didn't even stand. Non-responsive and narrative. Sustained. Answer the question, Mrs. Brennan. Margaret's face flushed. She wasn't used to being interrupted. Bradford tried again. Did you intend to deceive your husband? No, I was trying to help. Yes or no, Mrs. Brennan? No. Diane made a note. Bradford asked a few more questions. Weak ones. Establishing that Margaret had been married for 28 years, that she'd raised 2 children, that she'd been a devoted wife. Then it was Diane's turn. She stood slowly, walked to the podium, placed a single document in front of her. Mrs. Brennan, she said, her voice pleasant, conversational, you testified that you didn't intend to deceive your husband, is that correct? Yes. When you created Mab Properties LLC, did you tell Mr. Brennan? It was a routine business filing. Yes or no? No. When you purchased the Newport Beach condo for $1.2 million in cash, did you tell Mr. Brennan? I was planning to... Yes or no? No. When you transferred $60,000 from your joint retirement account 3 weeks ago and labeled it medical emergency, Ashley, was there actually a medical emergency? Silence. Mrs. Brennan? No. So you lied. I was protecting the funds for... You lied. You created a false notation on a bank transfer to deceive your husband. Yes or no? Margaret's jaw was tight. Yes. Diane picked up another document. Mrs. Brennan, do you know a man named Richard Valente? Yes. What is your relationship with Mr. Valente? He's a friend. A friend? Yes. Diane nodded. She walked to the clerk, handed her a set of photos. Your Honor, I'd like to enter exhibits 47 through 53. Surveillance photos, time and date stamped. The clerk marked them. Diane placed copies in front of Margaret. Mrs. Brennan, that's you in exhibit 47, isn't it? Entering the Newport Beach condo with Mr. Valente on August 14th at 2:30 p.m. Margaret looked at the photo. Her face went white. Yes. And exhibit 48. You're leaving the same condo 6 hours later. August 14th, 8:43 p.m. Yes. What were you doing for 6 hours with your friend Richard Valente in a condo your husband knew nothing about? We were discussing the property for 6 hours. Yes. Diane picked up another document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit 91, an email from Mrs. Brennan to Mr. Valente dated September 3rd. She placed it in front of Margaret. Can you read the highlighted portion for the court, please? Margaret stared at the paper. She didn't read. Mrs. Brennan, Judge Henley said, read it. Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. It says, "Can't wait to start our life together. A life I actually deserve. Not this boring prison I've been stuck in for 30 years. The courtroom was absolutely silent. The boring prison, Diane said, refers to your marriage to Mr. Brennan, correct? I was upset when I wrote that. Yes or no? Yes. And the life together you reference, that's the life you were planning with Mr. Valente after you left your husband, correct? Yes. Diane walked back to the podium, picked up a thick binder. Mrs. Brennan, I have here documentation of 127 separate fraudulent transfers, totaling $847,000 over a 24-month period. I have emails, I have surveillance photos, I have property records. I have your daughter on video helping you stage furniture in the condo you were planning to move into with your boyfriend. You have systematically stolen from your husband for 2 years while planning to abandon him. And you testified under oath that you didn't intend to deceive him. Margaret said nothing. Do you understand, Diane continued, her voice sharp now, cutting, that what you've done isn't just grounds for divorce. It's potentially criminal. That structuring financial transfers to avoid detection is a federal crime. That conspiracy to defraud a spouse is prosecutable in California. Bradford jumped up. Objection. Counsel is testifying. Overruled. Judge Henley leaned forward. Mrs. Brennan, answer the question. Margaret was crying now. Real tears, not the performance tears from earlier. I just wanted a life that was mine, she said. I gave him 30 years. I raised his children. I kept his house. I was invisible. I wanted something for myself. I felt something then. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Pity. Because she'd convinced herself that being a wife, being a mother, being part of a partnership meant being invisible. She'd convinced herself that I'd somehow imprisoned her in a life she'd chosen, in a house I'd paid for, in a marriage where the only person who'd been invisible was me. Judge Henley sat back in her chair. Mr. Chen, she said, your motion is denied. All accounts remain frozen pending trial. Mrs. Brennan, you are ordered to provide a full accounting of all assets, all accounts, all properties within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in sanctions and a referral to the district attorney for criminal investigation. She looked at Margaret. You're very fortunate your husband hasn't pressed criminal charges yet. I suggest you cooperate fully with discovery. The gavel came down. It was over. We walked out of the courthouse into sunshine that felt earned. Diane was already on her phone, probably billing the morning's work at $800 an hour, worth every penny. That, she said, ending her call and looking at me, was one of the most satisfying cross-examinations of my career. Your wife committed perjury, admitted to fraud and handed us grounds for full reimbursement plus sanctions. What happens now? I asked. Now she has 30 days to disclose everything. She won't. They never do. When she doesn't, we file for contempt and sanctions. We get a forensic accountant appointed by the court. Not you, conflict of interest. And they'll find whatever she's still hiding. Then we go to trial where a judge awards you everything you're asking for plus attorney's fees, and your wife walks away with whatever's left of her dignity, which based on today's performance isn't much. I nodded. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus Webb. Richard Valente just listed his house. Word is your wife called him last night, panicking about criminal charges. He's done with her. I showed it to Diane. She smiled. They always leave when the money disappears. The full trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but it never happened, because 3 weeks after the hearing, Bradford Chen called Diane with a settlement offer. Margaret would keep the Newport Beach condo, but only because I agreed to it. Not because she deserved it, because I wanted her to have something to remember what she'd thrown away. A $1.2 million box by the ocean, where she could sit alone and think about Richard Valente, who dumped her the day after she couldn't make bail on her credit card debt. Ashley would get nothing. Not from me. She was an adult. She'd made her choices. Tyler would continue getting support through college because Tyler hadn't been part of the conspiracy. Tyler had been high. I would keep the house, the retirement accounts, what was left of them, all marital assets except the condo. And Margaret would pay me back $400,000 over 10 years. Diane recommended I reject it and go to trial. We can get more, she said, but I didn't want more. I wanted it to be over. I signed the settlement. The divorce was final on a Tuesday, appropriately. 2 months after everything was finalized, I got a call from Patricia, the bank manager. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "I need you to come in. There's something we need to discuss regarding your accounts." I met her at the same branch, same office, same mahogany desk. She slid a document across to me. "When we conducted the forensic audit for the court-appointed accountant," she said, "we found something. An old account, joint account, opened in 1997. You and Mrs. Brennan were listed as signatories. The account had been dormant for years, just sitting there with a minimum balance." She paused. "After the fraud judgment was entered, all jointly held assets became subject to reimbursement claims, which means this account, technically marital property, reverted to you as the injured party." "How much?" I asked. She smiled. $1.18. I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in months. "Your ex-wife," Patricia continued, "left you exactly $1 in your marriage. The court gave it back to you, with interest." She handed me a cashier's check. $1.18 down. I looked at it. 28 years, $847,000 stolen. Countless breakfasts made for people who didn't see me. A lifetime of being invisible. And in the end, the bank called me back to give me my dollar. Margaret moved into the Newport Beach condo alone. Ashley got a job as a server at a restaurant in Santa Monica. Not because I cut her off, I did, but because Richard had cut her off too, and her mother couldn't afford to support her anymore, and nobody wanted to hire a 26-year-old with a master's degree in art history and no work experience. Tyler graduated, got a job in marketing, calls me sometimes, we're working on it. Richard Valente married a woman 20 years younger than him 6 months after leaving Margaret. I heard they bought a house in Palm Springs. I hope he's happy. I hope she has a good lawyer, and me, I kept the house. I sold it a year later for $3.1 million. I bought the cabin in Colorado, the one Margaret had forgotten about. I wake up every morning to mountains and silence and coffee I make for myself. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not an ATM. I'm not a supporting character in someone else's story. I'm just Robert Brennan, 59 years old, retired free. If this story reminded you that a man's dignity isn't negotiable, that you should never accept crumbs of respect in your own life, hit that subscribe button right now. We tell the stories nobody else will, the hard truths, the real battles, the wins that come from patience and documentation, and refusing to let people mistake your kindness for weakness. Welcome to the pack. Because at the end of the day, they'll take everything from you if you let them. Your money, your time, your peace. But they can't take your ability to document, to wait, to plan, to win. And sometimes, winning just means getting your dollar back and knowing you earned it.